live.
Does it matter if we're not?
It does. I would wait.
Sorry. So we're now live, yes?
We are live.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going? How's it going?
It's a cold Thursday morning in late fall in Oklahoma, so it's not bad.
Yeah.
Nice. We'll give it just a minute or so for people to kind of join the live stream. Welcome for everyone who's already present and listening in. Today we're talking about understanding CI/CD for PMs, POs, and executives. We have a great panel of folk here to talk through it. And I'm excited. So as you join, if you could just comment kind of your name or your role and any questions that you may have around CI/CD to help the conversation. Make sure that it's tailored to what you're interested in and what you want to know about the subject and how you can apply it to your daily life. Let's, get started with introductions.
Yeah.
My name is Jay Mansoray. I am a product coaching consultant at Industrial Logic. So definitely working on the business side of things and in collaboration with the technical side of the teams. If you all would like to introduce yourself, let's start with Mike.
Been an Agile coach since like 2004. I was introduced early on to extreme programming and loved it. The engineering practices are things that I teach and help other organizations adopt. Continuous integration and continuous deployment being one of them. So I'm really excited about this topic. We're trying to take it from a non-technical point of view so people can see what the advantages are. But I was honestly coming up as a technical guy. So hopefully if there's questions, people will just ask for the clarification that they need.
Perfect. Brett, we'll go to you.
Well, a lot of what Mike said is true for me. I've been doing software development in some form or another since the 80s. And I'm not a hardcore VI user, but I still use VI. So that will give you some context of how old I am. I'm a big fan of what we're talking about here because the thing that we're talking about here allows you to get feedback in such a way that it changes everything. And so I'm really excited about this topic just because it's so important. You know what I mean? And it's amazing what results you can get when you just try to make small. So I'm a big proponent of CD and a big fan of thinking about zero downtime and that kind of stuff. What are the things we can do to rapidly get value from being held by us to available to the customers?
Very good. I'm Perry Reid. I'm also a senior consultant, Agile coach with Industrial Logic. Been working in the Agile space really since about 2005, similar to Mike, and very excited to be sharing this topic. I have found that CI and CD are practices, and as you'll hear as we go through our talk today, that it really is a mind shift change and the way teams think about delivering value to their customers, and with it comes some amazing benefits for the business and for really everybody involved. It creates, I think, a more exciting, fun culture for the teams, as well as really expediting the delivery of value to your customers. So, very excited to be sharing some of our experiences around this practice and this mindset, and so looking forward to the talk today.
Fantastic. And again, for anyone who's joined since we started, if you could just drop your name and your role and any questions, thoughts, comments that you have in the chat as the conversation continues. Meant to be an integrated conversation between the listeners and the panel. So please feel free to comment. Again, any questions that you may have, any comments you may have on anything that needs when speaking on, and your name and role so we can know to tailor the conversation towards your individual interests. So let's jump right in. I think a good place to start would be to define what CI/CD is. So who wants to take that?
Would you jump down a few slides to that one? Yeah,
Absolutely.
that actually go up one. Oh, there's this one. Yeah. So continuous deployment, every commit goes live. That's one working definition. And
for the non-developers, what is a commit?
So excellent question. So if I have something I want to work on, let's say there's an irritating miscoloration on a web page. I can go in and change it, and then I can commit that change to whatever you're using for your source control repository, to your code base, and then minutes shortly later, I'll see it live. Our e-learning system is like that. I think it's around 20, is it about 20 minutes these days? Every change that you push goes live, but there's also protection that, for example, so deployment is every time I make a change, it goes live. Continuous delivery is I make it available and then we choose when we're going to make it go live. And that's actually what we're doing right now in the current project I just rolled off of. We're in a lot of shops, and if they want to get the latest version, they literally kill the app and then restart it, and a new version of all the JavaScript code will get pushed down. So in that case, it's the choice of the user when they want to get the update, and they're informed about how to do that. And continuous integration is the act of, if Mike, Perry, and I are all committing to the system, we coordinate our commits. Either we work together simultaneously, that's effectively integrating, or if we're working independently, we frequently throughout the day share our changes, probably through some tool. But I'll just say all of these things, people will talk about the tools. The tools are irrelevant. Any tools will work. This is about mindset and about a set of agreements about how people are going to choose to work with each other. So first of all of these things are a sets of agreements on how we choose to work with each other. And then they're supported by tools.
I have a story actually from Thanksgiving break similar to this. My son, who's taking a programming class, tells me he's in a game design class. I'm like, oh, cool. They're doing it in C++. And he's working with two other developers or two other students on this. And they've all been working independently on each different parts of their game. And then they planned on Sunday, before the day it was due, to integrate it. And so they're going to have...
What could possibly go wrong?
What they have not yet learned is just you need to integrate early. And a lot of projects, even out in the industry, will wait long periods of time before they actually try to integrate. And so the counter to that is actually the idea of this continuous integration. You don't put off integration till later. You actually run after it. You try to bring it forward. You actually try to do it. And you're doing it essentially continuously. So many times a day, as opposed to, oh yeah, we're going to do it, one time in several weeks, or, several weeks away from now.
Well, I love about that story, Mike, is it shows how important not only the integration of those changes, but actually the building up of the idea should evolve as well. So we often talk about evolutionary design as a way to start with the idea of whatever it is you're building as a naive and primitive first version of it. Get that working, and then build incrementally upon it as you go. If your son and his classmates were following that, not only would they have been starting with the early versions of the game, but they would have been integrating it and being able to get feedback on that. And that's one of the beautiful things about CI/CD, is it encourages rapid feedback on whatever it is you're building. So it's nice to see how these ideas fit together and really do support each other.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, to really give a specific example of rapid feedback on the recent project that I've been working on, a lot of times we're dealing with a legacy system and a new system, and we need to figure out, how to get those to play together. And the system is 10 years old. So we'll literally go into our code base, remove something, hard code something in, run it, get some information. It's like, aha, and then throw that all away. So we'll do some quick throwaway experiments to get some data, and then we'll take that data and turn it into something we can work. So we have a number of tests where we pulled raw results from the back-end system. We captured those as facts about the system, and then we use those facts to verify that our code does the same thing.
Yeah.
So and the reason that's important is that feedback loop where we might spend a half hour getting that little piece of information, but then we're going to reuse that thing, and it's going to save minutes every time we run the test. And we're going to run the test 20 times a day, 100 times a day, and we're going to be doing that for years. So, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to find little pieces of information that we're not unclear, and get and solidify it so that we can make better decisions later. Right.
So when you So when you guys talk about that quick feedback loop, that pushing multiple times a day, that pushing often, there are a lot of shops, right? There are a lot of places where they deliver every couple of months, or they deliver quarterly, or they deliver at some long interval, right? Definitely way longer than a couple of times a day. Why is that? And why is that gap so long, and why is it hard for places like that to shorten that window, or to adopt a method where they are pushing faster or pushing more continuously?
Jay, can you show the slide right before this one?
There we go.
Yeah.
I love this slide. It's
So
a great title.
Put this together to really illustrate this idea of the value of delivering more frequently. So you asked a really good question, and that is why don't companies or organizations deliver more often? And there can be legitimate reasons why it may be difficult to do so. But what everybody associated with that product team needs to realize is that every day you delay releasing means that the value that you started with, assuming that you prioritized your backlog from the most valuable thing to the next, to the next, to the next, it means that when you delivered something or you built something, that most valuable thing is now waiting in a queue, waiting to be, released to your customers. And you hold that value. You're basically holding that hostage while you continue to build more and more, presumably incrementally valuable things. But because they are probably prioritized lower than that first set of stuff, it means that that valuable piece of functionality is waiting for those longer things to release. And we've seen companies where you get to a point like in the graphic on the right, where we're 92% done with maybe hundreds or thousands of things that we've done, and we're holding on to that value before we release it. So,
and in this example, that's like 5 years of holding on value. We're not talking months. Months would be phenomenal in that situation, right?
Now there can be technical hurdles that need to be circumvented to allow you to release more often, and but it really does start with leadership and a desire to get that value out into the customer's hands more often and more frequently. And then the team needs to work through eliminating those technical obstacles until you get to a smooth flowing system. I had a great conversation with Mark Schell and John Fazzaro, colleagues of ours, who are working with a company doing some development for them. And they shared a great example of how they've been able to do that. And what I loved about it is they said, it has taken them many months to get there, but from where they started to where they are now is a remarkable improvement. And what he pointed out and sharing with me is that they couldn't have done it without the support of the leadership and the belief that the team did that this was going to get better. And so making that commitment, providing the time to make these changes, and then seeing it through all the way to get to where you want to be is how you get there. So as far as why things don't go more often, it's going to be situational, and every company is going to be a little different about what they feel like they can and can't support. But almost all of that, I think, is obstacles that if you really rationalize through it, you can eliminate most of those obstacles and get to a point where you can deliver value more quickly and stop holding it hostage.
Is this practice something that's more practical for only like larger companies? Like, is this something that's practical for smaller organizations or smaller teams? Or do you have to have a lot of resources and a lot of people in order to practice it effectively?
Anybody can do this. I mean, for example, first of all, better. We're looking for better all the time. So in that example that Perry was just talking about, if you look at the details of the store, it's like they identified what their problems were and they picked one and they fixed it, made it a little bit better. Picked one, fixed it a little bit better. So you can do that regardless of your tools and technology. You can do continuous delivery with bash scripts, or you can use really complicated tools, but it's all about the underlying intent. What does it take to get a line of code that I want into the hands of a user? And then what are all the steps along the way? And is there anywhere along the way that I can speed that up? And one example, Josh, Josh, who formed Industrial Logic, he's got a great example of you want to, if I come to you and I'm trying to figure out how to improve your process, the first thing we do is let's change a private variable name. Can't break anything. How long does it take that completely zero change to get into the hands of a user? And as you do that, write down in detail everything you need to get there. So now you're starting to map out the value stream. How do you get it there? And then you can start asking questions. Where is there a bottleneck here that I can improve? But the problem is, and this goes back to, I wrote something in Slack. I really think this is all about fear aversion, right? People are afraid of it. Yeah. You want to talk about that a little bit, Mike?
Actually, the whole time that Perry was talking, I'm like, I really think that part of why folks are using these really long release cycles and why they make it such an event is they actually associate releasing with a lot of risk. And they're not thinking in terms of how can you reduce the risk so that we could actually do this all day. I mean, releases should be boring. They shouldn't be something that everyone is on edge about. And I think that part of what you need to do is be able to, okay, do we have Control Z? Do we have an undo? Okay, if we push it out and for some reason it's bad, can we go back? Can we go back to last known good?
That's a great question, and it makes me think about industries that utilize technology where they're handling sensitive information, or the impact of their technology isn't just like a feature on an app where you're sharing pictures, but you're talking about people being able to track financial information or medical information, or even the operation of medical devices. And so when you talk about making mistakes and being able to pull it back, the potential impact of a mistake and what that looks like. And I think especially from an executive perspective, the fear of not just having to fix the issue, but also having to live up to how do we explain that and how do we maintain trust moving forward? What does the transition look like for an organization that maybe does push only a couple of months because they are afraid that if something happens, it's going to be catastrophic? Are there training wheels essentially for organizations that want to make that transition?
Yeah. One of the things that you have to start to develop is automation. So you need to be able to automate your builds, being able to automate your deployments. You want these things to be as turnkey as possible. And also, like I said earlier, early on, figure out how do we go back to a last known good? How can we hit Control Z if we need to? I've had folks where I said, you know what, just give me first a manual checklist of what you're doing right now to release. And then every time we go through a release process, we'll automate at least one of those steps. And so it turned out that they were able to, in a very, I think, low impact way, get to the point where they actually had full turnkey deployments. Now, along with those deployments, you're going to also have to think about automated testing. And that's also a big, that's almost another live event talk on its own. And you don't want the type of testing that looks like a human in front of a computer. You actually want, like automated tests where a computer is verifying that things are correct. In more of a programmatic way. But as you start to build all this infrastructure out, then it actually becomes extremely easy to either be pushing to a staged or develop to a test environment, or to be pushing to a production environment, and they're essentially no different.
Yeah, this is actually something that Industrial Logic has been doing for quite a while. The e-learning system that we promote has been doing continuous deployment since 2009, I believe. So we've got quite a bit of an experience working this way, and I can say with a team I was working with recently, I was serving in some of a product owner like position with them. I was giving them some direction, and they were doing some development, and I wanted to get feedback. And once we really started having the team work this way, I was able to get an amazing amount of input from the team, what they were building, and give them feedback almost real time. And that particular setting, the team was pushing to our little production environment, 40 to 50 times a day. And as from a product owner perspective, it was like Christmas all day long. I mean, I was able to open these little packages of additional functionality and evaluate it immediately. One of the questions that you brought up, Jay, is the question of safety. Well, one of the things in that explanation of the difference between continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment is this idea of that between continuous deployment, where the pushes are going out automatically, you want to get the software into a place where people can see it, but it may not. That doesn't mean that it is necessarily released. Mm-hmm. And Mike, I know you've got some great examples of this that you and I have talked about over the years. But that's a mindset that a lot of people don't grasp, is that because the software's been deployed, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is executable or visible to the customers. So there's the safety that you can build in so that you can even deploy things that aren't quite yet finished. And so this gives the team the ability to work incrementally, putting it out into production in a production-like environment or a production environment where the features are basically toggled off. Mike, I don't know if you want to pick that up and run with it, but I think that's a point worth digging a little deeper into.
You've actually hit a couple of them. One I'm hearing is latent code releases. Basically, one of the differences that you're going to go through is lots of organizations, the developers like to be on these long-lived branches, and then they only want to commit their code to the main line when it's going to go to deployment, and they're going to have a release, which might be many months apart. That's got its issues. I'm not going to go into it. What we change that with continuous integration, more trunk-based development, is actually the code is always integrated, but you find a way to sort of programmatically have a branch or an area that you either go into, possibly for A/B testing, or you don't, and it's just normal processing for everybody. If you do that, you have the ability to ship latent code. It's all integrated, so it's all tested at some point, and it's gone to production. But then it becomes a business decision if you actually want to turn that feature or on, capability on or off. And there's a variety of different ways to do that. Most common one that everyone reaches for is feature toggles, but it's not the only one. So that's part of that idea of latent code being released, having features available for, I'm sorry, it's being deployed. The release is when the business says, turn it on. So it's been there, it's been deployed, but the question is who decided and when did they decide that you wanted it on? Perry, there was another question in there, I can't remember.
Well, I've just got a comment on what you're saying. There's something implicit in what you're saying that I think is really important. You're talking about release, and we're talking about, so first of all, you just distinguish deploy from release.
Yes.
And as soon as you have a distinction, you have more places to make a choice. Okay, I should probably turn that off. But also there's, when we say release, even release itself, release, is it a general release? Is it a full release? Is it a release to test users? Is it a release to people whose last names start with S? So you can do those kind of things and actually have partial releases. I don't know if this is still the case, but Amazon used to have a policy that any developer could do an experiment for 2 hours in production with something like 5% traffic. And they have a mechanism that allows you to do it, turn it off quickly, et cetera. So they have a safe mechanism for experimentation because Amazon, all right, this isn't a small company. They learned that if developers actually can have good ideas, and if you allow them to try things out, you might find some really good things. But the thing is, if you want to do that, you need to do it in a safe way. So they actually said, this is so important, we're going to build a mechanism for allowing experiments of a particular nature so that developers can learn stuff. But distinctions are important. Deploy versus release, release versus fully released, but also deploy versus deliver. So I was in a situation, Mike, you as well, and Perry, you as well, where we had a customer that was delivering software via satellite. And that delivery was very unreliable. And just by separating deliver, then deploy, then release, we were able to isolate and debug things far better. So honestly, the more you can do vertical slices of everything, the more you can start to make little tweaks. And those little tweaks often have surprisingly larger effects than you expected because of the nature of feedback. And also just this, we keep talking about integration. I'll just say the longer you wait to integrate, the far worse it gets. And it's not a linear worse. It's an exponential worse. So I'll just say like,
no, that's good. And it brings me to it makes me think of, so John Boris, left a comment a few minutes ago and said, big releases, isn't it partly because the org still hasn't changed the way they plan? And so when you talk about, Brett, the example of developers being able to release to a small percentage of users or a small percentage of traffic, how do POs and PMs, that those product organizations, how do they start to plan around CI/CD, and not just plan around it, but plan so that CI/CD can be used to the benefit of the organization? Because to me, that example that you gave is a really good one of how business planning can align with good practices or better practices for their development teams. So like what kind of things can POPM do? What should they be asking their development teams? What should they be asking of their development teams so that to make sure that their product planning is aligned with?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've got some reactions.
I've got a lot of things. Yeah. Don't ask for things. First of all, stop asking for things because people need some time to actually have things. So part of the problem is don't schedule your people 100%. Don't slam people to the wall because you can look at the neuroscience behind this. You need about 70%. If you go much above that, your efficiency goes down, your ability to think goes down, and so on. So actually, study how brains work. Actually learn how these flesh bags that we occupy actually work so that you can actually make sound decisions as opposed to fear-based decisions, because most people are making fear-based decisions because there's an evolutionary propensity to do that. But a lot of the practices that we have go counter to our evolutionary tendencies, believe it or not. So find the fear and go into it.
So everything that Brett said, then I'm going to say some different things. While I've been a coach, folks have started to see the strength and the power in, if they go to iterations, they start with like 3-week iterations, and then you can kind of get them down to 2-week iterations. And then you could even start bringing up the idea of a 1-week iteration. And at one point when we were doing this, I said, look, we can actually change the way you're delivering. You can change the way you're planning. We can also even eliminate the idea of estimates if we just simply ask the question, what would you like in production by Friday? And so now all of a sudden that changes the conversation. You're not thinking in terms of these huge backlogs of things 6 months out and you want estimates on all the single stories. You're actually talking about, what do you think is the most important thing that we can actually get in production, and we can do it this week? What is it? And so we actually have a negotiation on Monday, and then by Friday we can actually see it pushed. Now, I used to think that was a great, was aggressive schedule. But now with trunk-based development and continuous deployment, you're actually able to do that like several times a day. But even to get people thinking differently, I still ask the question, well, what if you could actually have a shop that would say, what do you want in production by Friday? And so how does that change your thinking as a product owner or a developer? I mean, as a product owner or executive type?
Before one more thing. Okay, so Mike, that's the second time you mentioned truck-based development. For any non-developers that are tuning in, and by the way, if you've tuned in since the conversation started, thank you for joining. Please feel free to leave questions, comments, anything that you're interested in the conversation, would like to hear in the chat, and we'll try to address it. Can you define trunk-based development and how it supports CI/CD?
There's a main branch, and you don't have more than one branch. I mean, that's the simplistic thing. So here's the thing. I want to add a feature. So the first thing I do in the morning is I pull my code. I've got the latest version, Mike and Perry pushed. I'm working with somebody. We think we've got something working. It's been a long day. We're like 10 minutes already into the workday. We're ready to add a feature. We're done, as in we've got it coded. We've run the tests. And it's like, oh, these are going good. So I commit. I've said, I think this is pretty good. But the first thing I do then is I'm going to pull stuff down, make sure everything works, and then I'm going to push it back up. So we are communicating our code, not through separate branches. Technically, there are branches if we're using Git, whatever. But the bottom line is, I regularly, on a daily basis, throughout the day, many times a day, I pull from and push to the same branch that Mike is pulling it from and pushing to, that you would do, and Perry. We're all sharing the same branch. And as a result, that's why earlier I said, these practices are agreements on how we're going to work. So for example, if I pull something and the code's not compiling, I'm going to talk to the person that pushed the non-compiling code. I might fix it myself, but we're going to work together frequently. And we might just periodically jump in a Zoom together to talk through something. But And also I might preempt, like, I know that Mike's working on something and we might step on each other's toes. Hey, Mike, can we talk real quick? Let's see if we can figure out a path through this so we're less likely to step on each other's toes. So,
yep. I know we're running short on time. There was an example I saw at a customer site. They had like 25 teams. And what they would do is they would create at least 25 different branches out there. And then it would take them months to finally decide that they're going to release. They would actually get the one who wants to promote their code up to the top. This was AccuRev, not Git, but they would promote their code, and then 24 teams had to spend 2 days reintegrating all the changes that just showed up. And and the team that just, quote unquote released, they're the ones who are going out to production. But I finally had to kind of explain to the organization, you all are optimizing for basically delete from a database kind of idea. You either optimize for insert or optimize for delete. They were optimized in such a way that it would be very easy if your project doesn't ship to be able to clip it, and there was no trace in the code base that project ever existed. But in reality, all of their projects, nearly all of their projects, always went to production. So they had actually optimized in the wrong direction. They had optimized for not going, but in reality, what they needed to do was optimize for going. Now, granted, if they didn't if their project got canceled, it would be more work to try to back it all out. But that wasn't the majority of their workflow. And so it's just, they were setting themselves up for such horrible integration, and it would take 2 days after every release for all the other teams, and it was just painful. So
I hate to end the conversation here because I feel like we could talk about this for another 2 hours. But we did schedule it for 30 minutes. And so I want to be respectful of the time of everyone who joined for their lunch hour. Thank you, Brett, Mike, and Perry, for leading a super intriguing conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined, commented, the live stream. If you'd like to hear more about this topic or similar live streams in the future, please reach out to any one of us on LinkedIn or to Industrial Logic page. We do have 2 more live events coming up on December 7th and December 14th. On December 7th, we're going back into CI/CD, but talking about continuous compliance. So for regulated industries, how do you integrate it there? And then on December 14th, we're talking about the power of a product-focused bootcamp. And in addition to that, IL has been very gracious to extend their Cyber Monday sales. They're offering 40% off of workshops and 50% off of e-learning until December 1st. Extremely good deals for any organization. I can say that myself, not just because I help teach them, but also because I've sat through them and they are absolutely amazing and impactful. And a good holiday gift for your organization to come back from the holiday season. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate Shauna in the background, who's been like a super producer, and we look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks at the next live event.
Very good. Thanks, Jay.
See y'all.